You're still alive? Victor's voice echoed through the cavernous space, his designer shoes crunching the gravel floor of the warehouse. I figured you'd be crying in a hotel room by now. Or dead. Honestly, I had a bet running with Kyle. I stood before him, dirty boots on my feet, calluses on my hands, and a fire in my eyes that hadn't been there 30 days ago. Behind me, the dusty rolling doors creaked open. Naomi from HR stood with a man in a suit, the estate lawyer. In his hand was the final envelope, my grandmother's last words, her final blessing. Victor's smug smirk started to falter as the lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Granger, per the deceased's final condition, you are required to witness this. I opened the letter with trembling hands, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I had survived. What began as humiliation had become my liberation, and what was waiting inside that letter would change everything. My name is Emily Whitmore, and until 2 months ago, I was invisible. Not literally, of course, but in all the ways that matter in the corporate world of Asheville, North Carolina. I was the junior analyst who wore secondhand blazers and packed sad, little lunches in plastic containers. The one who spoke when spoken to. The one everyone's eyes skimmed past in meetings. I had spent 3 years at Pinnacle Financial Partners, where I analyzed risk assessments for corporate clients. My desk was in the corner, away from the windows with a small potted succulent that somehow survived despite the lack of natural light. Much like me, Victor Granger, my direct supervisor, had perfected the art of making me feel worthless. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to question your place in the world. Emily, he would say, drawing out the syllables of my name like they tasted unpleasant, why don't you just take notes today? Kyle can present your findings. And Kyle would, smile apologetically but wouldn't protest. Nobody ever did. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. 30 minutes before anyone else, because Victor once commented that I lacked initiative. I was reviewing a portfolio analysis when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Is this Emily Whitmore? A formal voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Frederick. Chambers from Chambers and Wynn Legal Associates. I'm calling regarding your grandmother, Josephine Whitmore. I'm afraid she's passed away. My grandmother, the woman I hadn't seen since I was 15. The brilliant, difficult woman who disappeared from my life after a falling out with my mother. I didn't know, I said, my voice small. I understand this comes as a shock. However, you are named in her will, and we need you to come to our office at your earliest convenience. I took the afternoon off, something I'd never done before, and drove to a sleek downtown building where Mr. Chambers awaited me in a wood-paneled office that smelled of leather and lemon polish. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, he said, shuffling papers. She left specific instructions regarding her estate. I nodded, not knowing what to say. My memories of Grandma Jo were fragmentary, her calloused hands guiding mine as we fixed a broken radio, the smell of metal and oil in her workshop, her laugh, rare but genuine, like a rusty gate opening. The bulk of her estate, including her properties, investments, and savings, estimated worth approximately $3 million, will go to you. But with conditions. My head snapped up. 3 million? Yes. However, to access this inheritance, you must fulfill a rather unusual requirement. He slid a document across the desk. On top was a faded photograph of an industrial building surrounded by chain-link fence. This warehouse on the outskirts of town belonged to your grandmother. It was her first business location. According to her, Will, you must live inside this warehouse for 30 consecutive days. No electricity, no running water, no outside help, no money, no phone, and no contact with the outside world, except for a weekly check-in with me to verify your continued presence. I stared at him. That's insane. Perhaps. But those are her terms. If you complete this challenge, you inherit everything. If you fail, even by a single day, the entire estate goes to the city as an anonymous donation. Why would she do this? Your grandmother left a letter to be opened upon completion. I imagine her reasons will be explained then. He adjusted his glasses. You have 3 days to decide. I left the office in a daze, the address of the warehouse clutched in my hand. $3 million. Freedom from my crushing student debt. Freedom from Victor and his casual cruelty. All I had to do was live in an abandoned building for a month. That evening, I drove to the address. The warehouse sat in an industrial district that had seen better days. Faded brick, broken windows patched with plywood, surrounded by a gravel lot overgrown with weeds. The chain link fence was rusted but intact. I peered through a gap in the boards covering a window. Darkness, emptiness, dust. Could I really do this? 30 days of isolation and hardship? The next morning at work, I requested a month of unpaid leave, citing a family emergency. When Victor demanded details, something in me snapped. My grandmother died and left me a warehouse, I said. I have to live in it for 30 days with no amenities to inherit her estate. His reaction was immediate and cutting. He laughed, a sharp barking sound that drew attention from neighboring cubicles. You're going to live in an abandoned building? For a month? With no shower? His voice rose with each question, making sure everyone could hear. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What is this, some kind of reality show? It's the condition of her will, I said, quietly. Well, that's certainly creative, he smirked. Tell you what, I'll approve your leave. I'm curious to see if you'll even last a week. By lunchtime, the entire office knew. I heard whispers as I passed the break room. Living in a rat-infested warehouse, probably full of homeless people and drug addicts. Victor's got a betting pool going. Kyle approached my desk with feigned concern. Hey, Emily, if you need anything. I'm not allowed outside help, I cut him off. That's the point. Right, he backed away. Good luck, I guess. Only Megan, the quiet marketing analyst who sometimes shared her homemade cookies with me, seemed genuinely concerned. Are you sure about this, Emily? She asked. It sounds dangerous. I don't have much choice, I replied. Besides, it's only 30 days. 3 days later, I stood at the warehouse entrance with nothing but a backpack containing a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a flashlight. Mr. Chambers unlocked the heavy padlock. Remember, I'll check on you every Monday at noon. No outside food, no supplies beyond what you find inside. Your grandmother was very specific. The massive door rolled open with a metallic groan, revealing a cavernous space filled with shadows and silence. Good luck, Ms. Whitmore, he said, handing me a key. I'll see you in a week. As the door closed behind me, locking me into my new home, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. For 30 days, this warehouse would be my world. I had no idea what awaited me in its dusty corners or why my grandmother had designed this strange challenge, but I was about to find out. The first night was the hardest. As darkness fell, the warehouse transformed from merely neglected to downright eerie. The wind whistled through broken windows, creating strange moaning sounds that made my skin crawl. Shadowy corners seemed to shift and move. Every creak and groan of the aging structure sent my heart racing. I made a nest of sorts in what must have been an office, a small room with a desk and an ancient executive chair with cracked leather upholstery. At least it was enclosed, giving me some sense of security. I used my jacket as a pillow and curled up on the dusty floor. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by noises I couldn't identify and the constant chill that seeped through my clothes. My dreams were fragmented, filled with my grandmother's face and Victor's mocking laughter. I woke to watery sunlight filtering through grimy windows. My body ached from the hard floor, and my mouth felt like sandpaper. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. I hadn't eaten since lunch the previous day. The warehouse looked different in daylight, less threatening but more depressing. It was a vast open space with a concrete floor, metal support columns, and a high ceiling with exposed beams. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light. Along one wall were several small rooms. Offices, a bathroom, what might have been a break room. Everything was covered in a thick layer of grime. The bathroom had a toilet that, miraculously, still flushed using the municipal water supply, though it made alarming gurgling noises. There was no running water in the sink, but at least I had somewhere to relieve myself. Small victories. Hunger drove me to explore more thoroughly. In the break room, I found a rusted mini-fridge that no longer worked and cabinets filled with mouse droppings. But in one cabinet, pushed to the back, was my first miracle. 3 cans of beans, their labels faded but intact. They were years past their expiration date, but beans don't really go bad, do they? I had no can opener. After a frustrating hour, I managed to open one can by scraping it against the rough concrete floor until the metal wore thin enough to puncture. The beans were bland and mushy, but I ate them cold with my fingers, savoring each one. By the afternoon of day 2, the reality of my situation had fully set in. I was alone, in a filthy, abandoned building with almost no resources. I had 28 more days to go. What had I gotten myself into? That evening, as I sat in the fading light, I remembered Victor's face, the cruel amusement in his eyes, the way he'd said, "She won't last a week." The memory sent a surge of determination through me. I might fail, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of being right about me. On the morning of day 3, I woke with a plan. If I was going to survive this, I needed to be methodical. First priority, water. Second, better shelter. Third, food. I found buckets in a janitor's closet and positioned them under leaks in the roof. It had rained overnight, and I already had a small supply of rainwater, enough to wash my face and hands. It wasn't drinking water, but it was something. In what must have once been a loading dock, I discovered a stack of wooden pallets. I dragged several to my office and arranged them into a makeshift bed frame, covering them with flattened cardboard boxes I found. It wasn't comfortable, but it was off the floor. The real discovery came mid-afternoon. While exploring a section of the warehouse I hadn't yet investigated, I found a door that led to a small storage room. Inside were tools, hammers, screwdrivers, pliers, all rusted but potentially useful. There was also a kerosene lamp with a small amount of fuel still in it, and most valuable of all, a camping mess kit that included a metal pot, pan, and utensils. That night, I heated my second can of beans over a small fire I built in a metal trash can, using scraps of wood and paper I'd gathered. The warmth of the fire and the hot food made me feel almost human again. As I sat by the flickering light, I noticed something scratched into the wall beside me, a series of marks, like someone counting days. Beneath them was a single word, begin. Had my grandmother left this message? Had she anticipated my presence here decades later? Or was it from someone else who had, sought shelter in this abandoned place? On day 4, I made another significant discovery. While examining the office that had become my sleeping quarters, I noticed that one floorboard seemed slightly out of alignment with the others. When I pried it up, I found a small metal lockbox. Inside was a notebook, its pages yellowed with age, and a letter in a sealed envelope with my name written on it, in fading ink. The handwriting was unmistakably my grandmother's, the same slanting script that had signed birthday cards long ago. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. My dear Emily, if you're reading this, you've accepted my challenge. Good. You're not weak, Emily. You're just untested. Survive, and you'll understand what I left you is more than money. It's freedom. This warehouse holds more than memories. It holds lessons. Look beyond what you see at first glance. The tools for your survival are here. You just need to find them. The notebook contains some of my thoughts from when I started my business. Read it if you wish. Perhaps it will help you understand why I've asked this of you. Remember, steel is forged in fire. Grandma Jo. I held the letter to my chest, tears welling in my eyes. It was the first direct communication I'd had from her in 15 years. Her words made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. That night, I read the notebook by the light of the kerosene lamp. It was a journal from 1975, when my grandmother had first leased this warehouse to start her tool manufacturing business. Her words were practical, focused, occasionally frustrated, but never defeated. She described setbacks, sexism from suppliers who didn't want to deal with a woman, financial struggles, and the daily challenges of building something from nothing. One entry in particular caught my attention. Wasn't sure I'd make it through this month. Equipment broke down, orders delayed, and bank threatening to call in loan. Slept on office floor for 2 weeks to save on gas money. Mr. Harwood from First National came by unannounced, probably hoping to catch me failing. Instead, found me rebuilding the press myself. The look on his face was worth all the grease under my nails. Loan extension approved today. Sometimes you have to be seen struggling to prove you deserve to succeed. As I fell asleep that night, I felt something new taking root inside me. A small seed of my grandmother's determination. Maybe there was more to this challenge than just enduring. Maybe there was something to discover about myself. I was beginning to understand why Grandma Jo had designed this test. And I was no longer sure that Victor was wrong about me. I was starting to wonder if I had been wrong about myself. 1 week into my warehouse exile, I discovered something that changed everything. I was exploring the north corner of the building, where the roof had begun to leak during a particularly heavy rainstorm. As I placed buckets to catch the water, I noticed a faded blueprint pinned to the wall, almost invisible against the weathered concrete. It was a technical drawing of some kind of machine part, the edges curling in yellow with age. In the bottom right corner was my grandmother's signature, J. Whitmore, 1978. This wasn't just any warehouse. This had been her workshop, her laboratory, her beginning. I carefully removed the blueprint and discovered more beneath it, dozens of them showing various mechanical components, tool designs, and machine modifications. My grandmother hadn't just owned a business, she had been an inventor. That night, as I heated my dinner, a can of corn I'd found in a forgotten cabinet, I studied the blueprints by lamplight. Though I didn't understand the technical aspects, I could see the precision in her work, the elegance of her solutions. Each drawing was meticulous, with notes in her distinctive handwriting filling the margins. Adjust tolerance by 0.003 inches to reduce vibration. Steel alloy performs mice. Better at sustained temperatures above 180 degrees. Patent application submitted 4/12/79, approved 10/30/79. My grandmother had been building something remarkable right where I was sitting, and no one had told me. The next morning, I heard a car approaching outside. It was Monday, check-in day with Mr. Chambers. I carefully folded the blueprints and tucked them under my makeshift bed before going to meet him. "You look different," he said, studying my face. I imagined what he saw. A woman with dirty clothes, unwashed hair, and dark circles under her eyes, but also a woman standing straighter than she had a week ago. "I'm fine," I said, "just adjusting." He nodded, made a note on his clipboard. "Any problems I should be aware of?" I thought about the leaking roof, the mice I'd heard, scurrying at night, the way the wind howled through broken windows. "Nothing I can't handle." "Very good, I'll see you next Monday." As he turned to leave, I called after him, "Mr. Chambers, did you know my grandmother well?" He paused. "We worked together for 30 years. Josephine Whitmore was the most determined person I've ever met. She built her company from nothing, faced down competitors, 3 times her size, and never compromised her principles. The business world underestimated her at their peril." His expression softened slightly. "You remind me of her." After he left, I returned to my exploration with renewed purpose. In a corner of the warehouse, behind stacks of wooden crates, I found a metal door I hadn't noticed before. It was locked, but the office key my grandmother had left me fit perfectly. Inside was a treasure trove, a small, windowless room filled with filing cabinets. Each drawer contained meticulously organized folders, patent applications, business correspondence, financial records, and most valuable of all, her personal journals. I spent the rest of the day reading, absorbing her words, getting to know the grandmother I'd been denied. Her earliest entries were from 1975 when she was 28, just a few years older than I was now. First day as my own boss. Terrifying and exhilarating. Mr. Peterson at the bank laughed when I applied for a business loan, asked if my husband knew what I was doing, told him I didn't have a husband, just a daughter and a good idea. He stopped laughing when I showed him my prototype and the orders I'd already secured. Got the loan. Now to prove him right for giving it to me. I read about her struggles as a single mother trying to build a business in a male-dominated industry, about how she worked 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the warehouse office to save commuting time, about the innovations she developed, specialized precision tools that eventually became industry standards. And I read about my mother. Lisa brought Emily to the warehouse today. She's growing so fast, already 5 years old and asking questions about everything. She wanted to know how the drill press worked, so I showed her. From a safe distance, of course. Her eyes lit up when she saw the sparks from the metal grinder. I see myself in her curiosity. Lisa doesn't approve of my bringing her here. Says it's no place for a child, especially a girl. We argued again. She doesn't understand that I'm building this for her, for Emily, for all the women who will come after us. I sat on the dusty floor, tears streaming down my face. I had no memory of that visit. No memory of the drill press or the metal grinder or my grandmother's patient explanations. Those moments had been stolen from me through the estrangement between my mother and grandmother. An estrangement I had never fully understood. That night, I slept in the filing room, surrounded by my grandmother's words, her legacy, her life's work. For the first time since entering the warehouse, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, I continued my exploration with renewed vigor. In a far corner of the warehouse, I discovered a storage area containing what looked like abandoned equipment covered in tarps. When I pulled the dusty coverings away, I found old manufacturing machinery, lathes, presses, grinders, all in disrepair, but potentially salvageable. And beside them, shelves of raw materials, metal sheets, rods, pipes, and boxes of smaller components. My grandmother had left behind not just her ideas, but the means to realize them. I had no training in metalworking, or engineering. The most mechanical thing I'd ever done was change a tire, and that had been with step-by-step instructions from a YouTube video. But something stirred in me as I ran my fingers over the machines. A memory, perhaps, of those small hands guided by my grandmother's larger ones. Or maybe it was something in my blood, an inherited aptitude I'd never had the chance to discover. For the next few days, I focused on making the warehouse more livable. I used materials I found to patch the worst of the roof leaks. I created a rainwater collection system that provided me with enough water to wash with, if not to drink. I found an old camping stove in one of the storage rooms, which allowed me to heat water and cook without building a fire. And each evening I read more of my grandmother's journals, piecing together the story of her life, her business, and ultimately, her falling out with my mother. It seemed to center around my grandmother's dedication to her work, the long hours, the single-minded focus, the sacrifices she made. My mother had wanted a more conventional life for me. She had married when I was 10, moved us to the suburbs, and tried to give me the normal childhood she felt she'd been denied. The final break came when my grandmother refused to sell her business to a larger corporation, a move my mother had seen as stubbornness, but which I now recognized as principle. My grandmother had built something that stood for quality, integrity, and independence. She wouldn't sell that legacy for any price. 2 weeks into my warehouse stay, I woke with a clear sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving this challenge. I was being reborn through it. My grandmother hadn't designed this test as a punishment, but as an opportunity, a chance to discover who I really was when stripped of modern comforts and social expectations. I spent that day clearing a workspace near one of the windows where the light was strongest. I found a table, cleaned it meticulously, and arranged tools I'd salvaged from various corners of the warehouse. Then I selected one of my grandmother's simpler designs, a specialized wrench with an adjustable head, and decided to try building it. The process was frustrating, physically demanding, and filled with failures. I cut my hands, burned my fingers, and created multiple useless pieces of metal before I began to understand even the basics of what I was attempting. But with each mistake, I learned. With each failure, I adjusted. By the time Mr. Chambers arrived for my third weekly check-in, I had produced something that, while crude, was recognizably a tool. "What's that?" he asked, eyeing the metal object in my hands. "A prototype," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. "I'm just getting started." 3 weeks into my warehouse challenge, I had established a routine. Mornings were for practical tasks, collecting and filtering water, maintaining my living space, searching for useful materials. Afternoons were for learning and creating, studying my grandmother's designs, practicing with the tools, working on my own projects. Evenings were for reflection, reading her journals, writing in my own, planning for the next day. I was no longer merely surviving. I was thriving in a way I never had at Pinnacle Financial. Here, every achievement was mine. Every problem solved was a victory. Every day completed was proof of my resilience. My body had changed too. My hands were calloused, my arms stronger, my skin tanned from working near the windows where sunlight streamed in. I had lost weight from the limited diet, but I felt more substantial somehow, more present in my own skin. I was thinking about this transformation while working on my latest project, a set of precision calipers based on one of my grandmother's designs, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up outside. It wasn't Monday. Mr. Chambers wasn't due for days. Who could be visiting? I set down my tools and moved quietly to the window. Through the grimy glass, I saw a sleek black BMW parked in the gravel lot. My stomach dropped as a familiar figure emerged from the driver's side. Victor. He looked out of place in his tailored suit and Italian shoes, staring at the warehouse with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. What was he doing here? How had he even found this place? I ducked away. From the window, heart pounding. According to the rules, I wasn't supposed to have contact with anyone except Mr. Chambers. Would Victor's unexpected visit invalidate my challenge? Would I lose everything because of his interference? I heard him approach the main entrance, then the sound of the metal door rattling as he tried the handle. It was locked. I always secured it from the inside, partly, for safety, and partly to remind myself of my commitment to stay. "Emily?" His voice carried through the cavernous space. "Are you in there? It's Victor, from work?" As if I could forget. "I know you're in there," he continued. "Your car is still parked down the street. Clever hiding spot, but not clever enough." I remained silent, hoping he would leave. But Victor was nothing if not persistent. "Look, I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. The office isn't the same without you. That was Rich. 3 weeks ago, he'd barely acknowledged my existence except to criticize my work or steal my ideas. I brought coffee, he called, his voice taking on that cajoling tone he used when trying to charm clients. And sandwiches? Thought you might be hungry in there? My stomach growled, traitorously. I'd been subsisting on canned goods and the occasional wild edible I'd found growing near the warehouse. Dandelion greens, blackberries from a tangled bush that had reclaimed part of the parking lot. A fresh sandwich sounded like heaven. But I knew what this was. Victor hadn't come out of concern. He'd come to see if I was actually doing it. Living in the warehouse, as I'd said. He'd come to confirm I was failing, struggling, ready to give up. He'd come for a story to tell around the office. Emily? At least let me know you're alive in there. His voice had taken on an edge of irritation. Victor hated to be ignored. I sighed, then moved to the door, keeping it closed between us. I'm fine, Victor. But I can't have visitors. It's against the rules. There she is. I could hear the smile in his voice. I was starting to worry. Everyone at the office is talking about your little adventure. I'm sure they are, I said dryly. So it's true? You're really living in this dump for a month? It's not a dump. It's my grandmother's property. Right, the inheritance thing. He paused. Must be worth a lot if you're willing to do this. I didn't respond. Come on, Emily. Just open the door. Have a coffee with me. Tell me what it's like in there. The betting pool has reached $400, you know. Kyle thinks you're secretly staying at a hotel and just coming here during the day. I'm sorry to disappoint Kyle, but I'm following the rules. Prove it, he challenged. Open up. Let me see your setup. I don't need to prove anything to you, Victor. There was a long silence, and for a moment I thought he might leave. Then, you know, Emily, I've been thinking. When you come back to Pinnacle, assuming you actually complete this bizarre challenge, I think you deserve a promotion. The senior analyst position is opening up next month. You'd report directly to me, of course, but it comes with a nice salary bump. Corner office, too. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door, closing my eyes. A month ago, that offer would have meant everything to me. It would have validated years of underappreciated work, of being overlooked and underestimated. It would have been proof that I belonged. Now it felt like what it was, a bribe. A way to buy my story, to make himself the magnanimous boss who recognized potential. That's generous, I said carefully. But I haven't decided if I'm coming back to Pinnacle. What? He sounded genuinely surprised. Where else would you go? I know Regent Associates tried to poach you last year, but they're not even in the same league. I'm considering other options. What options? You need me, Emily. Your career needs me, let's be honest. You're good with numbers, but you lack presence. You need someone like me to advocate for you. There it was, the negging, the subtle undermining that was Victor's specialty, building you up with one hand while tearing you down with the other, leaving you grateful for the scraps of approval he deigned to offer. I appreciate your concern, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. But I have work to do. Please don't come back, Victor. I'll see you when my 30 days are up. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice hardening. I'm trying to help you. Do you think anyone else at Pinnacle even remembers your name? I'm the only one who's bothered to check on you. Goodbye, Victor. I heard him muttering as he walked back to his car, caught fragments about ungrateful and waste of time. The BMW's engine roared too. Life and gravel sprayed as he reversed quickly and drove away. I leaned against the door, trembling slightly. The encounter had left me shaken, but also strangely energized. For the first time, I had stood up to Victor. I had refused his manipulation, his false generosity, his attempt to make me feel small and dependent, and it felt good. That evening, as I wrote in my journal by lamplight, I realized something important. I no longer cared what Victor thought of me. I no longer needed his approval or validation. Somewhere in these 3 weeks of solitude and self-discovery, I had found something more valuable than any promotion he could offer. I had found my own voice. The next day, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I explored parts of the warehouse I hadn't yet investigated, finding more treasures, old catalogs showing my grandmother's product line, photographs of her at trade shows, awards she had won for her innovations. In one dusty box, I discovered something unexpected. A business plan, dated 1992, for a new venture called Whitmore Women's Workshop. According to the detailed proposal, It would have been a training program for women interested in trades and engineering, offering apprenticeships, scholarships, and job placement services. The final page was a handwritten note, tabled indefinitely due to funding constraints. Revisit when financially viable. This matters. JW. My grandmother had dreamed of creating opportunities for women like her, women who had ideas and talents but lacked access to training and resources. She had wanted to build a legacy beyond her own success, and she had never realized that dream. As I sat surrounded by the evidence of her brilliance, her determination, and her unfulfilled vision, I felt something shifting inside me. The warehouse was more than a test of my endurance. It was an invitation to continue what she had started. For the first time in my life, I could see a future that excited me, one that had nothing to do with risk assessments or corporate ladders or corner offices, a future built with my own hands, guided by my grandmother's blueprint. When Mr. Chambers arrived for my weekly check-in, I was ready with questions. The business my grandmother founded, Whitmore Precision Tools, what happened to it after she died? He seemed surprised by my directness. It was sold to Consolitech Industries about 5 years ago, as specified in her will. The proceeds form the bulk of the estate you stand to inherit. And this warehouse? Why wasn't it sold with the business? She specifically excluded it from the sale, said it was too important to let go. I nodded, pieces falling into place. One more question. Did she ever mention a project called Whitmore Women's Workshop? His eyes widened slightly. Yes, she did. It was something of a passion project for her in her later years. She never managed to get it off the ground, though. Always said she needed the right person to run it. As he drove away, I stood in the doorway of the warehouse, watching until his car disappeared around the bend. 7 more days. Just 1 more week, and I would have fulfilled my grandmother's challenge. But now I understood that the 30 days were just the beginning of what she had planned for me. The final week of my warehouse challenge brought a change in weather. Crisp autumn air slipped through the cracks in the walls, and golden light slanted through the high windows in the afternoons. I had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the place, the way the building creaked as it warmed in, the morning sun, the distant sound of trains passing in the night, the territorial owl that hunted mice in the overgrown lot outside. In many ways, I felt more at home in this abandoned space than I ever had in my sterile apartment or the corporate offices of Pinnacle Financial. I was becoming someone new, or perhaps I was becoming who I was always meant to be. My hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused and capable. I could light a fire in seconds, repair a leaking roof, even fashion basic tools from scrap metal. I had learned to be resourceful, to see potential in things others had discarded. Most importantly, I had discovered a quiet confidence, a certainty about my own abilities that no performance review or promotion could have given me. After Victor's unwelcome visit, I doubled down on my exploration of the warehouse. In a section I had previously overlooked, behind a sliding panel covered with faded shipping labels, I discovered what must have been my grandmother's private workshop, a small room filled with specialized tools, a workbench, and shelves lined with prototypes in various stages of completion. On the wall hung framed patents, 17 in total, with my grandmother's name printed boldly at the top of each one. Josephine Elizabeth Whitmore, inventor, innovator, pioneer. The awards and certificates surrounding them told a story of a woman who had refused to be dismissed or diminished, who had built something lasting through sheer determination and brilliance. And there, on the center of the workbench, was a black leather portfolio with a simple note attached. For Emily, when she's ready. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were detailed designs for tools specifically created for women's hands. Smaller grips, different balance points, more ergonomic shapes. Preliminary market research showed a significant gap in the industry. Handwritten notes outlined manufacturing costs, distribution channels, potential investors. It was a complete business plan, updated periodically over the years, with the last revision dated just months before my grandmother's death. She had been preparing this for me even as her health failed, even though we hadn't spoken in 15 years. She had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That night, I sat cross-legged on my makeshift bed, the portfolio open before me, reading by lamplight, until the small hours of the morning. The more I read, the clearer her vision became. A company that would not only create tools designed specifically for women, but would also train and employ women in manufacturing and engineering roles. A company that would continue the legacy she had begun with Whitmore Precision Tools. but with a more explicit mission of breaking down barriers. Whitmore. Women's Works, W3 for short. By dawn, I knew what I wanted to do with my inheritance. The money was important, yes. It would provide the startup capital needed to launch the business. But the real inheritance was this vision, this purpose, this chance to build something meaningful. I spent the next days in a frenzy of planning and preparation. I cleaned out the workshop completely, organizing the tools, cataloging the prototypes, making notes on improvements and modernizations that could be made to my grandmother's designs. I sketched layouts for how the warehouse could be renovated, manufacturing space here, offices there, a training center in the back section with plenty of natural light. On day 28, I was so absorbed in my work that I almost missed the sound of a car pulling up outside. My heart raced momentarily, thinking it might be Victor again, but the gentle knock at the door was distinctly different from his impatient pounding. "Emily, it's Megan. From work. Can I talk to you?" Megan, the quiet marketing analyst who sometimes shared her homemade cookies with me, the only person at Pinnacle who had shown genuine concern when I announced my warehouse challenge. I hesitated. I wasn't supposed to have visitors, but Mr. Chambers would be coming for my final check-in tomorrow anyway. And something in Megan's voice sounded urgent. I opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked tired, her usually neat appearance slightly disheveled, as though she had come straight from the office. "I know you're not supposed to have contact with anyone," she said quickly. "I won't. Come in. I thought you should know what's happening at Pinnacle." "What is it?" "Victor's been telling everyone you cracked under the pressure, that he visited you and found you living in filth, half-starved, possibly having some kind of breakdown." She twisted her hands anxiously. "He's making it sound like you're going to be institutionalized when you get out of here." I felt a flare of anger, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a strange, calm detachment. Of course Victor would try to control the narrative. Of course he would attempt to undermine me before I could tell my own story. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely curious. Megan looked down. "Because it's wrong. Because I've spent 3 years watching him take credit for your work and belittle your contributions. Because," she took a deep breath, "because I've been too afraid to speak up, and I'm tired of being afraid." I studied her face, seeing something I recognized, a quiet determination beneath the anxiety, someone else who had been made to feel small, whose potential had been overlooked. "Thank you for coming," I said softly, "but I'm not worried about Victor's stories." She looked confused. "You're not?" "No." I smiled, feeling the truth of it as I spoke. "Because in 2 days I won't be returning to Pinnacle Financial. I'll be starting my own company." Her eyes widened. "Really? What kind of company?" "A manufacturing and training company for women in trades and engineering, based right here." I gestured to the warehouse behind me. "And I'm going to need a marketing director who understands the vision." Megan's mouth fell open slightly. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. 15% equity to start, with performance-based increases. More responsibility than you've ever had at Pinnacle, but also more freedom and purpose." "But you haven't even seen my work. How do you know I'd be good at marketing something like this?" "Because you just drove 40 minutes after a full day of work to warn a colleague about office politics. That shows integrity and initiative. The rest we can figure out together." She stared at me for a long moment, then broke into a wide smile. Can I see inside? Just for a minute?" I hesitated, then opened the door wider. "One quick tour, then you have to go and we'll talk details after my 30 days are officially complete." As I showed her around, the workshop, the prototypes, the spaces I imagined transforming, I could see her catching the vision, her marketing mind already spinning with possibilities. "This is incredible, Emily," she said as we returned to the entrance. "It's like your grandmother left you a blueprint for your future." "She did," I agreed. "I just had to be ready to see it." After Megan left, I returned to my planning with renewed energy. Having spoken the vision aloud to someone else made it more real, more achievable. I worked late into the night, refining my ideas, preparing for day 30, the day Mr. Chambers would arrive with my final check and, presumably, my grandmother's last letter. The day I would officially inherit not just her fortune, but her legacy. When I finally lay down to sleep on what would be my last night in the warehouse, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had begun as a bizarre challenge, a month of isolation and hardship, had become the most transformative experience of my life. I had entered the warehouse as just Emily, the invisible analyst, the woman who spoke when spoken to, The employee who packed sad little lunches and accepted being overlooked. I would leave as Emily Whitmore, founder, visionary, heir to a legacy of innovation and determination. And I couldn't wait to see Victor's face when he realized the truth. Day 30 dawned bright and clear. I woke early, feeling strangely ceremonial as I gathered my few belongings and packed them neatly into my backpack. Then I set about cleaning the small area that had been my home for the past month, sweeping the floor, folding my makeshift bedding, organizing the tools I had used. It wasn't that I planned to leave the warehouse behind. Far from it. I intended to return the very next day to begin the work of transformation. But this particular chapter was ending, and I wanted to honor its conclusion. By mid-morning, I had assembled everything important. On the workbench in my grandmother's workshop, her journals, her designs, the portfolio marked for me, and my own notebook filled with plans and ideas. Beside them, I placed the crude tools I had created during my stay. Imperfect but functional, each one representing a skill learned, a challenge overcome. At precisely noon, I heard the now familiar sound of Mr. Chambers' car crunching on the gravel, outside. But this time, there was another vehicle as well. The sleek purr of an expensive engine that could only belong to one person. Victor. I smiled to myself. Perfect timing. I walked to the main entrance and rolled open the heavy door. Mr. Chambers stood there in his usual formal attire, clipboard in hand. Beside him, looking smugly expectant, was Victor in a tailored suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Chambers nodded formally. Congratulations on completing your 30 days. Thank you, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Please, come in. Victor's eyes darted around the cavernous space, taking in the industrial setting with poorly disguised disdain. So this is where you've been living? Like some kind of warehouse hermit? I ignored the jab. Mr. Chambers, I wasn't expecting company for our final meeting. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Granger was quite insistent on witnessing the conclusion of your challenge. He claimed to have a professional interest in your welfare. I'm sure he did, I said dryly. Victor flashed what he probably thought was a charming smile. I just wanted to be the first to congratulate you, Emily. The office hasn't been the same without you. I'm touched by your concern, I replied, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in my voice. Shall we proceed with the formalities, Mr. Chambers? The lawyer nodded, reaching into his briefcase to withdraw a thick envelope sealed with wax. As specified in your grandmother's will, upon successful completion of the 30-day residence requirement, you are to receive this final communication from her, as well as full legal control of her estate. He handed me the envelope with a solemnity that befitted the occasion. The wax seal bore an embossed J.W., my grandmother's initials. Before I open this, I said, looking directly at Victor, I'd like to know why you're really here. His smile faltered slightly. I told you. No, I cut him off. The truth, Victor. You mocked me when I told you about this challenge. You laughed in my face. You told the entire office I wouldn't last a week. You've spent the past month undermining me to our colleagues, suggesting I'm having some kind of breakdown. So why show up now, at the moment of completion? He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Mr. Chambers as if seeking an ally. Finding none, he straightened his tie and attempted to recover his composure. Fine. I'm here because I'm curious about what you've inherited. The rumor is that your grandmother was worth millions. As your supervisor, I have a vested interest in your financial situation, especially if you're planning to return to Pinnacle. My supervisor, I repeated slowly. Is that how you see yourself? Because, from where I'm standing, you've been more of an obstacle than a mentor. You've taken credit for my work, dismissed my ideas, and consistently made me feel that I don't belong. Victor's face reddened. That's an unfair characterization. Is it? Let me tell you what I discovered during my 30 days here, Victor. I discovered that I'm the granddaughter of Josephine Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Precision Tools and holder of 17 patents. I discovered that I come from a line of innovators and problem solvers. And I discovered that I've been wasting my potential at a company that doesn't value me. I turned to Mr. Chambers. May I open the letter now? He nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. With steady hands, I broke the wax seal and unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper within. My grandmother's handwriting flowed across the page in elegant, decisive strokes. My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, you have completed the challenge I set before you. You have proven what I always suspected. That you possess the same spirit, determination, and ingenuity that built Whitmore Precision Tools from nothing but an idea and sheer stubbornness. The Yakshay warehouse was my beginning. I hope it has become yours as well. By now, you will have discovered the legacy I truly wish to leave you. Not just the financial assets, which are substantial, but the vision for Whitmore Women's Works. This was to be my final contribution, but my time ran short. I believe you are the one to bring it to fruition. To that end, I have arranged for additional resources, beyond what is outlined in my will. Frederick Chambers has the details, but in essence, I have set aside specialized equipment, materials, and contacts within the industry. Everything you will need to launch W3 successfully. You may wonder why I didn't simply tell you about this inheritance, why I required the 30-day challenge instead. The answer is simple. I needed to know you were ready. Not just for the money or the opportunity, but for the understanding that comes from building something with your own hands, from facing obstacles alone, from discovering your own strength. You are ready now, Emily. You are a Whitmore woman in more than just name. With love and complete confidence, your grandmother, Josephine P.S. I've instructed Frederick to execute one final detail of my will upon your successful completion, the transfer of 10% ownership of Consolitech Industries to you, making you one of their largest individual shareholders. Use your vote wisely. They've been cutting corners on quality since they acquired my company, and I find that unacceptable. I looked up from the letter to find both men watching me, Mr. Chambers with quiet satisfaction, Victor with growing alarm. Consolitech Industries, I said slowly. Isn't that Pinnacle's largest client, Victor? He swallowed visibly. What about them? It seems I now own a significant portion of the company, which means I have quite a bit of influence over who handles their financial portfolio. The blood drained from Victor's face as the implications sank in. Emily, Ms. Whitmore, I corrected him. Or perhaps, you should simply call me ma'am, considering I'll be meeting with Consolitech's board next week. Mr. Chambers cleared his throat. There are several other documents requiring your signature, Ms. Whitmore, to finalize the transfer of assets. And I have a comprehensive file regarding your grandmother's preparations for Whitmore Women's Works. Thank you, Frederick, I said, deliberately using his first name to establish our new relationship. I'll review everything carefully. Victor stood frozen, clearly calculating the damage to his career if Consolitech pulled their business from Pinnacle, or worse, if they specifically requested he be removed from their account. You can go now, Victor, I said, turning away from him to face Mr. Chambers. I have business to discuss with my lawyer. Emily, wait, he began, his voice taking on that cajoling tone I had grown to despise. Let's not be hasty. I've always seen your potential. That's why I pushed you so hard. I was preparing you for greater responsibility. I turned back to him, meeting his desperate gaze with calm certainty. No, Victor. You pushed me down to elevate yourself. There's a difference. I can make it up to you. He insisted. The senior analyst position, it's yours. Hell, I'll recommend you for management track. Just don't use your new position to retaliate. I studied him for a moment, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. Not as the intimidating boss who held my career in his hands, but as an insecure man terrified of losing his carefully constructed facade of success. I'm not interested in retaliation, I said finally. That would require me to care about you far more than I do. As of this moment, I'm tendering my resignation from Pinnacle Financial. My new company will require my full attention. New company? He echoed weakly. Whitmore Women's Works, I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. We'll be launching next quarter. And no, Victor, we won't be needing Pinnacle's financial services. The look on his face, a mixture of shock, fear, and dawning comprehension, was more satisfying than any revenge could have been. He had expected to find me broken, humbled, grateful for his continued patronage. Instead, he found a competitor, an equal, someone who no longer needed his approval or feared his disapproval. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel with diminishing volume until there was only silence. Mr. Chambers Frederick watched him go with undisguised amusement. Your grandmother would have enjoyed that immensely, he said. She had very little patience for men who underestimated women. So I gathered from her journals, I replied, smiling. Now, tell me about these additional resources she arranged. As Frederick outlined the extensive preparations my grandmother had made, from securing manufacturing equipment to establishing preliminary contacts with potential clients, I felt a profound sense of connection to her. She had created this opportunity for me, had believed in me even when we were estranged, had seen potential in me that I hadn't seen in myself. And now, standing in the warehouse that had been her beginning and would become mine, I made a silent promise to honor her legacy by building something worthy of the Whitmore name. The 30-day challenge was complete. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after my warehouse challenge, Whitmore Women's Works, W3, was no longer just a vision scribbled in notebooks and dreamed up during long nights of isolation. It had become a tangible reality, breathing new life into the old warehouse that had once felt so desolate and abandoned. The transformation was remarkable. The cavernous space now hummed with activity. Industrial sanding machines whirred, metalworking tools clinked rhythmically, and voices called out across the workshop floor. Primarily women's voices, confident and clear. Large windows that had once been boarded up now flooded the space with natural light, illuminating workstations where apprentices bent over precision tools, learning the trade under the watchful eyes of experienced mentors. My grandmother's private workshop had become my office, though I kept it largely as she had left it. Her patents still proudly displayed on the walls, now joined by framed newspaper articles about W3's launch and the first production run of tools designed specifically for women's hands. Her workbench remained, now bearing both her prototypes and the refined versions we had developed. "Emily?" Megan knocked on my open door, tablet in hand. "The journalist from Women in Manufacturing is here for your interview." I looked up from the design specifications I'd been reviewing. "Thanks. Can you bring her back and maybe grab us some coffee from the break room?" Megan nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "Nervous?" "A little," I admitted. "I'm still getting used to being the face of the company." "Well, you're doing a fantastic job. Our social media engagement is up 40% since your last industry talk, and pre-orders for the spring catalog are already at capacity." That was Megan, always armed with data to bolster confidence. She had transformed from the quiet analyst afraid to speak up at Pinnacle to a marketing powerhouse who had given W3 a distinctive voice in the crowded manufacturing sector. Her 15% equity stake had been the best investment I'd made, second only to my decision to offer Naomi from HR a similar position as our director of people and training. As Megan left to escort the journalist, I took a moment to center myself. These interviews still felt strange. People asking about my vision, my journey, my insights into industry trends. For someone who had spent years being overlooked, the attention was both validating and uncomfortable. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa Chen, shook my hand firmly as she entered. "Ms. Whitmore, thank you for making time. Your company has become something of a phenomenon in the industry." I gestured for her to take a seat across from me. "We've been fortunate to find a receptive market." "I'd say it's more than fortune," she replied, setting up her recorder. "You identified a significant gap in the market, tools designed specifically for women's ergonomic needs, and combined it with a training program that addresses the persistent gender imbalance in manufacturing and trades. That's strategic vision." I smiled, thinking of the leather portfolio my grandmother had left for me. I can't take full credit. The concept was my grandmother's. I'm just the one who implemented it. "Josephine Whitmore," she nodded. "A pioneer in her own right." Our research department pulled up quite a bit about her career. 17 patents, built Whitmore precision tools from scratch, refused multiple buyout offers until shortly before her death. She paused, studying me. "But what's most interesting is how you came to inherit this legacy. There's quite a story there, isn't there?" And so I told her about the warehouse challenge, about the 30 days that had transformed me from an undervalued corporate analyst to the founder and CEO of W3. I spoke about discovering my grandmother's journals, her designs, her vision for a company that would empower women in male-dominated fields. I explained how living with nothing had taught me to see potential in what others discarded, how isolation had connected me to my own strength and resilience. What I didn't mention was Victor, or the betting pool at Pinnacle, or the quiet satisfaction I'd felt when Consolitech had transferred their business to a competing firm after a routine review of their financial services providers. Some parts of the story weren't relevant to W3's mission, and I had no interest in framing my success as a reaction to past mistreatment. "That's remarkable," Vanessa said when I finished. "Most people would have seen the warehouse challenge as a punishment or a bizarre hoop to jump through for money. You saw it as an opportunity for discovery." "My grandmother was a wise woman," I replied. She knew that inheritance isn't just about assets changing hands. It's about values and vision being passed down, tested, and renewed. We continued the interview, discussing W3's product line, our apprenticeship program that specifically recruited women from underserved communities, our partnerships with technical schools and community colleges. Throughout the conversation, I found myself speaking with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a year ago. After Vanessa left, I walked through the workshop, checking in with the production team. Our first full product line, 27 tools designed with women's ergonomic needs in mind, was shipping to distributors next week. Advance reviews had been overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for our innovative grip designs and balance points. "Ms. Whitmore," called a voice from the training section. It was Daria, a 19-year-old apprentice who had joined our program after dropping out of college, where she'd felt out of place in male-dominated engineering classes. "Can you check my welding? I think I'm getting better, but I'm not sure about the consistency." I examined her work, noting the even seams and clean finish. "This is excellent, Daria. You've made huge progress." Her face lit up with pride. "Really? I was worried about the corner joint." "The corner is the best part," I assured her. "You have a natural feel for this. Trust your instincts more." As I continued my rounds, I reflected on how many of our apprentices and employees reminded me of myself, women with talent and potential who had been made to feel they didn't belong in technical fields. W3 wasn't just manufacturing tools. We were creating a space where these women could discover their capabilities, just as I had during my 30 higher days of isolation. Later that afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled with Frederick Chambers, no longer just my lawyer, but now a trusted advisor and board member. We were discussing expansion plans, including the purchase of adjacent property to increase our manufacturing capacity. "The financials look solid," he said, reviewing the projections. "Your grandmother would be impressed with how quickly you've scaled the operation." "We still have a long way to go," I said. "The apprenticeship program is at capacity with a wait list of over 200 applicants. We need more training space, more equipment, more instructors." Frederick smiled. "Always looking ahead. That's very Josephine of you." He closed his folder and leaned back in his chair. "Have you given any thought to the memorial scholarship we discussed? The one in your grandmother's name?" I nodded. "I've drafted a proposal. Full scholarships for 10 women annually to complete trade certifications or engineering degrees, with guaranteed internships at W3. I'd like to formally announce it on the anniversary of her death next month." "She would have loved that," he said softly. "You know, in all the years I worked with Josephine, I never saw her as excited about anything as she was about the plans for this company. She believed in you completely, even though we hadn't spoken in 15 years. Especially because of that," he replied. "She respected your mother's decision to keep you away from the business world, even though it broke her heart. But she kept track of you, your academic achievements, your career, moves. She knew exactly who you were and what you were capable of." I felt a familiar tightness in my throat. I wish I could have known her as an adult. There's so much I would ask her now. "In many ways, you've gotten to know her better through her journals and this warehouse than you might have in person," Frederick observed. "Some legacies are best understood through the work left behind." That evening, after everyone had gone home, I returned to my office and opened the drawer where I kept my grandmother's journals. I had read them countless times over the past months, finding new insights with each reading. But tonight, I turned to an entry I had marked with a slip of paper, one that had become something of a personal manifesto. "Built my first prototype today after 5 failed attempts. Hands bleeding, back aching, but the design works perfectly. This is what they don't understand about creation. It's not about having the right answer immediately. It's about being willing to fail repeatedly until you find the path forward. Each failure is information, not defeat. Those who give up after the first obstacle never discover what might have been waiting just beyond their persistence." I ran my fingers over her handwriting, feeling connected across time and space to the woman who had written these words decades ago in this very building. The warehouse that had once felt like a prison sentence had become the birthplace of a new chapter in the Whitmore legacy, one I was proud to be writing. Outside my window, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the workshop floor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new lessons. But tonight, in the quiet of the warehouse that had become a second home, I felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to a place or a business, but to a lineage of women who had refused to be limited by others' expectations. "Steel is forged in fire," my grandmother had written. And in the crucible of those 30 days, I had discovered my own strength, a strength that would now forge new paths for others. 1 year to the day after I first entered the warehouse, I stood before a crowd gathered on the newly renovated grounds of Whitmore Women's Works. The autumn sun warmed my face as I prepared to speak, looking out at the assembled guests, employees, apprentices, business partners, community leaders, and, journalists. Behind me stood the transformed warehouse, its brick exterior restored to its original beauty, large windows gleaming, the W3 logo prominently displayed above the entrance. Beside the main building was our newest addition, the Josephine Whitmore Training Center, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to educating the next generation of women in trades and engineering. This was the official ribbon-cutting ceremony, but it represented so much more than a building opening. It was the public culmination of a journey that had begun in solitude and struggle and had blossomed into something beyond even my grandmother's vision. A year ago, I began, my voice carrying across the expectant crowd. I entered this warehouse with nothing but a backpack and a challenge. 30 days of, isolation, no modern conveniences, no outside help, a test designed by my grandmother, Josephine Whitmore, to determine if I was worthy of her inheritance. I paused, looking up at the building that had changed my life. What I didn't understand then was that the true inheritance wasn't the financial assets or even the property. It was the opportunity to discover who I really was when stripped of comfort and convenience. It was the chance to connect with my grandmother's legacy through the space where she had built her own dreams from nothing. In the front row, I could see Megan and Naomi, both beaming with pride. Beside them sat Frederick Chambers, who had become not just an advisor but a friend. Representatives from our retail partners and distributors filled several rows, their presence a testament to W3's growing influence in the industry. And in the back, partially obscured by a column but unmistakable in his expensive suit, stood Victor. He hadn't been invited, but I wasn't surprised to see him. The success of W3 had made headlines in local business publications, and Victor had never been able to resist being adjacent to success, even when it wasn't his own. Today, Whitmore Women's Works stands as more than a manufacturing company, I continued. We are a community, a training ground, and a statement that women belong in every industry and at every level of expertise. Our tools are designed by women, for women, with ergonomics that acknowledge and celebrate the differences in our bodies without limiting our capabilities. I gestured to our first graduating class of apprentices, 23 women of various ages who had completed our 6-month intensive training program. They stood proudly in their W3 work shirts, tools hanging from their belts, tangible proof that our mission extended beyond profit margins. But perhaps most importantly, we are continuing the legacy of Josephine Whitmore, who believed that innovation doesn't just happen in corporate, boardrooms, or university laboratories. It happens in warehouses and workshops, in the hands of people who see problems differently and aren't afraid to get their hands dirty finding solutions. I moved toward the large ribbon stretched across the entrance to the new training center, picking up the ceremonial scissors from a small table. In honor of my grandmother, whose vision and determination made all of this possible, I am proud to dedicate the Josephine Whitmore Training Center, a space where women will find the tools, knowledge, and community they need to build their own legacies. With a clean snip, I cut the ribbon. Applause erupted from the crowd, and our apprentices cheered loudly, their enthusiasm infectious. Photographers captured the moment, cameras flashing as I stood in the doorway of the building that represented our future. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and toured the facilities, I found myself approached by various well-wishers, suppliers congratulating us on our growth, community leaders expressing gratitude for the economic impact of W3, journalists seeking quotes for their articles. I was speaking with a representative from a national retailers association when I felt a presence at my elbow. I turned to find Victor, his smile as practiced and artificial as ever. "Emily," he said, extending his hand. "Congratulations on all this." He gestured vaguely at the buildings and crowd. "It's quite impressive what you've accomplished in such a short time." I accepted his handshake briefly, noting that he still couldn't bring himself to use my last name or proper title. "Thank you, Victor. What brings you to our celebration?" "Professional curiosity," he replied smoothly. "Pinnacle has several clients in manufacturing who might be interested in your products. I thought I should see firsthand what all the buzz is about." "How thoughtful," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Feel free to take a catalog. Our wholesale department can answer any questions you might have." He nodded. his eyes darting around the successful enterprise I had built without his help or approval. I could see the calculations happening behind his gaze, how to position himself advantageously, how to retroactively claim some connection to my success, how to save face after having so publicly doubted me. You know, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, I always knew you had potential. That's why I pushed you so hard at Pinnacle. Sometimes people need a challenge to really step up. I studied him for a moment, marveling at his ability to rewrite history in his favor. A year ago, his dismissive attitude had wounded me deeply. Now it was merely amusing, a reflection of his insecurity rather than my worth. That's an interesting perspective, I replied. If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with our graduating apprentices before they leave. As I walked away, I felt a final release, the last lingering threads of my old life falling away. Victor and Pinnacle Financial belonged to a chapter that had closed. They had no power over me anymore, not even the power to inspire resentment. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of conversations, tours, and photographs. By early evening, most of the guests had departed, leaving only the core W3 team gathered in the main workshop for a more intimate celebration. Megan clinked a spoon against her glass, calling for attention. I'd like to propose a toast to our fearless leader, Emily Whitmore, who took a crazy challenge and turned it into the most exciting company I've ever had the privilege to work for. To Emily, the group chorused, raising their glasses. And, added Naomi, to the 57 women who have completed or are currently enrolled in our training programs, all of whom will go on to change the face of manufacturing and trades in their own communities. To our apprentices, came the response. One more, said Frederick, his voice cutting through the chatter. To Josephine Whitmore, whose vision planted the seed for everything we see around us today. May her legacy continue to grow through all of you. To Josephine. The name echoed through the workshop, bouncing off the high ceilings and filling the space with a sense of continuity and purpose. Later, after the celebration had wound down and the building had emptied, I found myself alone in my office, looking at the wall of patents and achievements that chronicled my grandmother's remarkable life. Beside them now hung framed milestones of W3's first year. Our business license, the cover of our first product catalog, a group photo of our inaugural class of apprentices. On my desk sat a small wooden box I had crafted myself during those 30 days of isolation, one of my first attempts at working with the tools I'd found in the warehouse. It was rough and imperfect, but I cherished it as a reminder of where this journey had begun. Inside the box was the letter my grandmother had left for me, its pages now soft from frequent handling. I knew the words by heart, but I still found comfort in reading them, in tracing the loops and angles of her handwriting, in feeling connected to the woman who had seen potential in me long before I saw it in myself. As I closed the box and prepared to leave for the night, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. Confident posture, steady gaze, hands calloused from work I loved. I hardly recognized myself as the same woman who had entered this warehouse a year ago, uncertain and invisible. The warehouse had stripped away everything. External, comfort, convenience, validation from others, and forced me to confront who I truly was beneath the layers of adaptation and accommodation I had built up over years of trying to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me. In that confrontation, I had discovered not weakness but strength, not limitation but possibility, not isolation but connection to a legacy larger than myself. My grandmother's final gift hadn't been the money or the property or even the business plan she had left behind. It had been the 30 days of transformation, the crucible that had revealed what I was truly made of. As I locked the building and walked to my car, I looked back at the warehouse silhouetted against the twilight sky. What had once seemed like a punishment had become the foundation of a new life, not just for me, but for all the women who would pass through these doors in the years to come. My boss had laughed when I inherited an abandoned warehouse and had to spend 30 days there with nothing. He had told everyone I wouldn't last. He had been wrong. But more importantly, I had been wrong about myself. I had underestimated my own resilience, my own creativity, my own capacity for growth and transformation. The warehouse hadn't just been a test of endurance. It had been an invitation to become the woman my grandmother had always seen in me, a woman of vision and determination, a woman who could build something lasting and meaningful, a woman who could extend a legacy beyond herself. And as I drove away, the lights of Whitmore Women's Works glowing behind me like a beacon, In the gathering darkness, I knew with absolute certainty that I had accepted that invitation with every fiber of my being. Some inheritances come in the form of money or property, changing hands in an instant. But the most valuable legacies are those that transform us from within, revealing not who we were meant to be, but who we already are when we find the courage to stand in our own light. That was my grandmother's true gift, and it was one I intended to pass on day by day, woman by woman, building a future that honored the past while creating something entirely new. The warehouse had been just the beginning.